Um, so we'll pick up with this week's parsha with Parsha Toldot and with Yitzchak as a character. Yitzchak, I find, seems to get a little bit of the short end when people are discussing the Avot. The first time I gave this year, I called it middle father syndrome. That he kind of just like gets, right? He's Abraham's son and he's Yaakov's father, but all the action is with Avram and Yaakov. Yitzchak doesn't eat, the closest thing Yitzchak gets to a parsha is this week's parsha, is Toldot. But the two biggest stories about it are very much not, Yitzchak is around, but he's not really doing all that much, right? The beginning of the parsha, we find him davening, then they have children, and you have Yaakov getting the Bechorah, buying the Bechorah from Esav, and then at the end you have Yaakov getting the brachot from Yitzchak away from Esav, right, by tricking his father. Yitzchak is there, but he's certainly far from the focal point of the story. He's more of a supporting actor. In between, there are some bizarre stories that we'll look at a little bit more closely in a second, but by the time you get to next week's parsha, Yitzchak is entirely out of the picture. We follow Yaakov to Lavan's house, and last week's parsha already, again, was about Yitzchak. Eliezer was trying to find a bride for Yitzchak, but he wasn't there at all, right? He's very much behind the scenes, so Yitzchak doesn't really do that much, and very, very passive. So we started talking.
With last week's parsha, what strikes me every year is the last one of the last sentences of the parsha, when the text writes that he loved Rivka. Emotion is not very evident in Bereshit, and maybe in other books, Chumash as well. The text is so spare that to come across something as strong as this, that he loved his wife, I think maybe it's one of the other times, I think that loving somebody, a child, I think appears earlier. But anyway, because it's so rare in the text, every time I come across it, I startle a little bit.
And it's particularly striking, contrasting it with what we see in next week's parsha that we'll talk about soon, that Yaakov loved Rachel. That's more of the love that we're used to, right? Yeah. That feels like the romantic love at first sight and everything that we think of when we think of love. Over here, what happens is his bride is selected for him. They marry, and then after that it says Vatihilo Isha, and they got married. Then Vayahaveha, he loved her. Vayinachem Yitzchak Acharei Imo. You're right. It's a very loaded pasuk, and it seems to be telling us lots of interesting things about love, because this is not the kind of love that we think of in our 21st century Western world. And just going into this week's parsha, and a lot of people talk about this, that they don't seem to have the same kind of communication that his parents had, right? That Abraham and Sarah had, where they would just have it out, right? They disagreed over Yishmael and they communicated. Okay, so Hashem came in. I guess that would be helpful in many domestic disputes, right? They have God come in and say who's right. I guess at that point you can start fighting. But like when Rivka is troubled by her pregnancy, right? The behavior of the twins inside, she doesn't go to Yitzchak. She goes, Chazal say she goes to Shem, whatever it is, or she goes directly to talk to Hashem, whatever that means. And then at the end, when they have this clear difference of opinion about how to distribute the brachot, how to distribute the leadership of the next generation, we don't find them communicating with each other. So we do have the pasuk testifying that he loved her, but it seems to be a different model of love and marriage. I mean, Chaisar is very often the time that people talk about marriage, and the Torah's model for it, but it seems to be a different model. And I don't know, in some ways I guess maybe it's less complicated, right? The Rachel-Yaakov relationship got very complicated. I mean, to be fair, right, his father-in-law probably had a little bit to do with that. But introducing her sister into the equation. I actually just made a simcha, and I pointed out, we made a bat mitzvah, so I pointed out, thank you. We pointed out, I pointed out that, not related to what we're talking, a little bit related to what we're talking about over here. As we go through these parsha, I often find it striking that we have this tradition of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, where very clearly what it means to be a Jew is passed on from generation to generation. What it means to be a Jewish woman is not, right? In other words, Rivka never met Sarah, Rachel and Leah never met Rivka, right? That seems clear. I mean, it's possible that Leah and Rivka met, though Chazal would say no, and it seems unlikely from the Psukim, right? And it's not like they were getting it from their own home, because they were growing up in entirely non-Abrahamic homes. And therefore, the entire tradition of, as the DNA of our peoplehood is being set, the entire tradition of what it means to be a Jewish woman is being transmitted by men, right? I mean, it just makes you wonder. I mean, look, God has a plan and everything was, I don't know. It just makes you wonder what long-lasting impact that might have had on our religion. I'm not saying I know what the long-lasting impact of it is, but it's interesting to note, and that we should appreciate that by now we have this long-lasting feminine tradition of what being a Jewish woman looks like. Okay, fine. I don't know, something to think about. In any event, fine. So let's get back to Yitzchak for a second. Did I just get into trouble? I see.
No.
Okay. Okay. Good.
That was really interesting.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Fine.
I never thought about
I report, you decide. That's all. I'm not no implication. Okay. Fine. So what we see, so the Yitzchak, I don't want Yitzchak bashing, to the point where there was once, I don't know if any of you remember this, there was once like a little internal brouhaha in the Orthodox world where a prominent rabbi gave a drasha where he made the argument that the Yitzchak had Down syndrome. And he was trying to encourage us to be sensitive. I'm sure that his intentions were all very much in the right place. But he said, look, his, Yishmael laughed at him. Maybe there was something funny about him. And his mother was very old when she had him. And we don't find him actually doing much of anything. A different rabbi then wrote an essay poking fun. In the end, that article was pulled from his shul's website after it got controversial. And then another rabbi wrote an essay poking fun at it, where he argued that Yaakov suffered from hay fever because he was an ishtam, yoshevo alim, that he didn't want to go outside, and I don't remember exactly how it went. But his point at the end of kind of making fun was that special needs, Down syndrome, doesn't make a person any less of a member of Klal Yisrael or any less valuable, but it does make them less likely to be a leader, right? And Yitzchak was one of the leaders of our people, and therefore there are certain, it's not saying it's out of bounds in the sense of disrespect, it's just out of bounds in the sense of it's a poor reading of the Chumash. In any event, so how do we understand Yitzchak? So let's try to build up the question a little bit more, and then we'll try to propose some possible answer. Okay. So what do we know about Yitzchak? So number one, we know that he preferred Esav because he was Sayyid Befiv, right? V'rivka ohevet et Yaakov. Okay. He preferred Esav. What does it mean, Sayyid Befiv? So Rashi brings out on a shot level, it means that he would hunt. Right? He was the hunter. He was an Ish Yodei Tzayid, whereas Yaakov, he knew how to hunt. Whereas Yaakov was an Ish Tam, right? Tam means Tamim, like Noach, that he was pure, but it also means Tam, like when we say Tam at the Seder. Kind of simple, a little naive, right? Yoshev Oli, stay inside in the base medrash, whatever it was. Fine. And Yitzchak preferred Esav. Tzayid Befiv, simply that means that he would give him meat. Tzayid, his hunting was in Yitzchak's mouth. Rashi brings down the medrash that says, no, Tzayid Befiv in the mouth of Esav, because he was very clever and he knew how to manipulate people with his words. He was very charismatic. Yeah.
Following along your previous point, because Yitzchak was so, I don't want to say timid, passive, Asa was the opposite.
Right.
And it was like he aspired or he shavnachs
Good.
from him because he was everything that he couldn't be but wanted to.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. Good. So let's just dig a little deeper on sketching out what we know about him, and then we'll come back to that point. Great. So then after the brothers have this interaction where Yaakov buys the Bechorah from Esau. Okay? It doesn't tell us exactly how old they are. It says Vayigdalu hana'arim. They got older. Chazal say they were 13, and that's when Avram Avinu died. But from the pasuk, it seems clear that they are of a certain age. So at that point, what happens? Vayira av ba'aretz. We have our third telling of a similar story. We have a famine in the land of Israel, and right, this is not the one from Avram Avinu, and Yitzchak goes down to Avimelech. And Hashem tells him, don't go all the way to Mitzrayim, right? You are different than your father. You have to stay in the land of Israel. So he just stops at Geror, where with Avimelech, Malchishtim, and he goes there. And the people ask about his wife, and what does he say, of course? We're in Pasuk Zayin in source 2. He says, Vayomar achotihi, ki yarei lo marishti pen yaharguni anshe hamakom alevga. Right? He was afraid to say that she was his wife, that he might get killed. So he followed what his father did, and he said she is his sister. Now, what happens at this point in the story? What's supposed to happen? We already saw this twice. He says, Achotihi. So what does that free up the reigning authority to do? She's available. Now I'm going to take her. That's not what happens over here. Vayiki orchulo sham hayamim. They were there for a while. Vayashkev Avimelech melech Plishtim ba'at hachalon. Avimelech goes and looks in the window, Vaya'ar, and he sees V'hinei Yitzchak mitzachek et Rivka ishto. Right? He sees Yitzchak mitzachek, right? That same verb, which is very loaded throughout Yitzchak's life, right? But he's mitzachek. He's acting as husband and wife with Rivka. And Avimelech gets outraged, right? Why did you say that she was your sister? Really, I see that she's your wife, and it could have, right? Right? Somebody, Achad Ha'am, meaning himself, the one, Achad Ha'am, the author, took it from here. Right?
Yes.
So he says, like, you set me up. You set me up to sin.
Yeah.
Now, what a strange story, right? On the one hand, why didn't Avimelech take Rivka? And then, so at that point, what's he doing? The king is going and spying, right? This is pre-modern day cameras and anything. What we're talking about is the king of the country going, like getting up on a stool and looking through. It's so strange sounding, right? What seems to be going on is that the reason why Avimelech didn't take her to begin with, and that he goes and spies on them, is because, let's imagine the scenario. We have Yitzchak and Rivka coming, according to the simple reading of the psukim, with 2 teenage boys, right? So the 4 of them are coming down to Egypt, man, woman, 2 children, and he says, Achotihi, she's my sister, right? This is the same country that a generation ago was thrown into plague because a guy who looked just like this, right? Chazal say that Yitzchak looked exactly like Avram, because some people were, right, the Leitzane Hadar, I don't know, I guess the old-time paparazzi, they were saying that, no, really this is Avimelech's kid, right? So therefore Yitzchak looked exactly like Avram. So we have a guy, a generation ago, someone who looked exactly like this. They're prominent, they're famous, came to our town, pulled this she's my sister shtick. We all were under this immense plague until God saved us. And he comes down with his 2 kids and says, Achoti? Give me a break. And therefore, why is he spying on him? Because he knew exactly what he was going to see between this man and his sister. The whole thing was not credible. So what's Yitzchak doing over here?
Why do you say he was spying? Well, the text says that...
That's what it says, by a shkif, and he looked, ba'ara chalon, he looked in a window.
He looked through the window, but he might have looked
could
through
have
the window
been
to
casually walking
a public area or...
Ba'ara chalon, v'hine Yitzchak misachek et Rivka. Right? They're acting intimately, in a way that he sees him through the window. To me, it seems more likely to be private room than park bench. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think, to me, the whole story seems so absurd that of course Avimelech didn't buy it. So what did Yitzchak think he was doing over here, right? Then next what we have is just some very mundane psukim where Yitzchak goes and Avimelech, like he did with Avram, says, stick around, we'll be friends. And he goes. And Yitzchak digs wells, right, the wells that his father dug, and then the Plishtim go and fill them up. And then he goes and he digs them again, just like his father did, and then Avimelech goes and the people go and fill them again. Avimelech says, what are you talking about? I have no idea, right? That's always, what's the guy in Casablanca? Right? Horrified, gambling, whatever, I forgot how it goes. He's always shocked, right? He's always shocked that anything is going wrong. Fine. Good. And Yitzchak, the Gibor, just seems to be, doesn't seem very strong over here. So what's going on over here? So we started talking last week about how 2 weeks ago, about how the midot don't just mean character traits, but it means kind of like personalities and modes of Avodat Hashem. Right? That Avram, the chesed personality, is active, always out serving Hashem in an active, outgoing way. Right? The first Chabadnik or NCSY, right? Spreading the word of Hashem to those who don't. Whereas Yitzchak, the Gibor, Ezohu Gibor HaKovesh et Yitro, is much more internally focused. Right? And therefore, we're not going to have lots of stories of his heroism. His heroism is going to be very much between himself and God. It's going to be very private. But Yitzchak didn't have, like we were saying with the Imahos, Yitzchak himself didn't have an entire range of religious role models. Right? Who was Yitzchak's religious role model, for the most part? His father, Avram. So his personality is that of the Gibor. But he looks up, he knows his father is the greatest person ever. Right? What's so great about him? Well, he goes and he proselytizes, and he's constantly preaching B'Shem Hashem. And he was this tremendous warrior that he took on the 5 strongest kingdoms in the land and single-handedly defeated them all. And everything that he hears about his father, I guess it sounds great, but it doesn't ring true. So what does he do? He tries to go and mechanically follow his father in a way that he doesn't really get. So, what do you do when there's a Rav? What do you do when you don't have children? You daven, right? Well, I guess his father didn't really daven. His father, although he did daven, right? He asked Hashem for it. Fine. What do you do when there's a Rav, when there's a famine? So you start going to Mitzrayim. Tells you don't go to Mitzrayim. Fine, we go to Plishtim. What do I do when I get there? I say she's my wife, right?
Sister.
I say that she's my sister. Even though at this point, when Avram did it, it made a lot of sense. When he's doing it, doesn't really make that much sense, but that's what I do. A lot of what my father did doesn't really make that much sense to me, but that's how to be an Eved Hashem, right? And if you look in these psukim, I left out, there are a couple of places where I put in ellipses, both after Pasuk Aleph and after Pasuk Chav Gimel, and if you look in source 3, those are the missing psukim. So, in case Yitzchak's mixed messages were, okay, so if you look, right after he starts going down towards Mitzrayim due to the famine, so it says, Vayari love Hashem, Vayomar al terid Mitzrayim hashchon be'eretz asher amar elach. Hashem tells him, don't go down. Gur ba'aretz hazos, vayeh imcha, I'll be with you, v'avarecha, I'm going to bless you. This is the brachot of Avram, right? The brachot always are Zerah and Aretz, right? You'll have many children, and you'll inherit this land of Israel, right? So he gets that. And he gives it to him, right? You'll have many, many children, like the stars, etc., that he already gave Avram. If you look at Pasuk Hey over here, it says, why are you getting all this? Ekev asher shama Avraham bekoli, because Avraham listened to my voice, v'yishmor mishmarti, and he listened to mitzvosai v'chukosai v'sarasai, and he listened to my commandment. Okay? Again, later, 22 psukim later, the next time Hashem talks to him, v'yer alav Hashem b'laylahu, this is already after the story with his wife and the beginning of the well story, but before the end of the well story. Vayomer Anochi Elokei Avraham Avicha. right? I am the God of Avram, your father, al tira. Don't be fearful. Ki itcha anochi, I am with you. Uverachticha ve'beisi et zeracha ba'avor Avraham avdi. I will be with you because of Avram, my servant. Right? So on the one hand, it seems like Hashem is trying to reassure Yitzchak. Like, don't worry about it. You have a safety net, right? You can do your own thing, and you don't have to worry about breaking this bond. I've chosen you, and there's nothing you can do to break it. But if you're Yitzchak, what do you hear? What's good about me? I'm Avram's son, right? So maybe there's that lack of communication where we find Yitzchak really expressing and being a hero for us, and this model of Gevura, which again is not going to show up in the headlines, but sometimes while he's finding himself, he's misinterpreting his role and trying to mimic Abraham in a way that has unusual results. Now, taking that, questions, comments? Okay, so taking that into the next generation. Okay, let's skip that next box for now. Actually, you know what? We'll do that box a little bit quickly, and then we'll go forward. Okay, if you remember, a couple of sessions ago, we talked about Ma'aser in Sefer Bereshit, right? We said that Ma'aser, tithing, giving 10% of what you have. So in later generations, when it became a mitzvah, after the Torah was given, it makes a lot of sense on an economic level that you support your civil servants by giving a certain amount. This is basically taxes, right? In other words, you give 10% of your income to 9% of the society, 1 out of 11 other tribes, right? Okay. But in Sefer Bereshit, before Matan Torah, when there are no civil servants, so why would you give ma'aser? So we distinguish between a token gift to Hashem of bikurim, the first fruits, or a korban, where you give a sacrifice to Hashem, where that's just acknowledging Hashem's role in your life and giving back. I can give to Hashem, right? The initiator of that was Cain. He was the first one who realized that you can give back to Hashem. Okay, the ma'aser is something different. 10% you don't give as a token. 10% you give to a partner. And there the arrow is pointed downwards. Instead of me giving up to Hashem, what 10% means is that Hashem, I'm acknowledging you as my partner in my everyday life. The arrow is pointed downwards. I'm inviting you. I just went and I conquered this whole war and I have all these spoils. Whatever victories, whatever success I have in the world, I'm not by myself. We're here together, God. We're doing this, right? So this really is a symbol of the chesed personality, right? The gibor, the arrow is always directed upwards. You're devoting yourself to Hashem. The chesed personality is bringing Hashem in and doing whatever it is that you're doing, right? You're taking Hashem with you as you live your life. You're not sealing yourself off from life and devoting yourself to Hashem. So if you look over here, it says, it says that he was a ish Yodea tzayit. So we said that Rashi points out that he would trick his father. Specifically, how would Esav trick his father? So he would say, Heich ma'asrin al hamelach ba'al hateven. How do I give ma'aser? He would come in, he would ask him these halachic questions to show what a big tzaddik he was. He would trick him. He would say, but what was the specific question that Rashi brings down? How do I give ma'aser on salt and on straw? Right? Now, salt and straw, you don't give ma'aser on. That's the point. Right? So it's a little bit of a silly question, but he's showing, I'm so firm that it's not enough for me to give maser on my crops. I also want to give maser on a little bit of everything. But symbolically, first of all, where have we seen salt before? Salt is with Sodom, right? That she turned into Nitziv Melech, as I'll say, because that represented her lack of chesed, that her neighbors wouldn't come knocking on her door for salt, and that nobody was ever allowed to lend things, right? And he's saying, no, I want to take the lack of chesed of Sodom and become the model of chesed by giving maaser, right? What Esav is essentially saying here is, look, Yaakov, I know, that guy, he's the Talmud Chacham, he's in the Beis Medrash, he's the Ish Tam, he's the Yoshe Bohalim, right? He's sitting and learning all day, he's in Kollel. So he's going to be the Yitzchak of the next generation. Esav is auditioning to become the Yaakov, the Avraham of the next generation. right? Yaakov, he can't do what your father did. The same way you can't do what your father did. But I can, right? I'm a Yodei Tzayid. I'm a warrior. I am charismatic. I can go out there and be that Avraham, right? In the past, it was split between generations. Now, we're going to split it within the same generation. There are two of us. So, Esav says, I'll be the Avram, I'll give the Maser, and Yaakov can sit and learn, and he'll be the religious leader, but I'll be the political marketing director, right? We'll divide it that way. And that's really what Yitzchak had in mind with dividing up the brachot. I didn't put it down over here, but the Sfas Emes points this out, and the Tzif points this out, that the Birkot Avram of Zera and Aretz, the religious brachot, were never up for grabs. Hashem gives that to, Yitzchak gives that to Yaakov at the very end of Parshat Toldot, after he knows that it's Yaakov, right before Yaakov flees. And then Hashem gives it to him at the beginning of Parshat Vayetze. That's never up for grabs. What they're fighting over, what Yaakov steals from Esav, is the bracha of Yitin Elokim Mital Hashemayim, Mishmanei Haaretz, Ruvdagam B'Shirosh, Have Gvir La'achecha, political power and material wealth. Right? That's what they're fighting over. So whereas Yitzchak thought we should have a division of power, checks and balances. Yaakov will be the religious leader, Esav will be the political leader, Yaakov will be me, Esav will be Avraham. Rivka said, no, you don't really get Esav. We can't do that. We have to force feed everything to Yaakov, even if he doesn't seem fit for the position. We don't have another choice, right? In other words, Rivka seems to be, like a lot of us are familiar with, right? You vote for the lesser of two evils, right? Even if someone doesn't seem particularly fit for a position, but it was a two-party system. She only had two kids, right? So she had to pull the lever for all of them for Yaakov, right? Now, so let's get to Yaakov in this equation going forward. It seems like Esav is entirely correct, and that Yitzchak is entirely correct. Up until the end of Parshat Toldot, Yaakov, as the Ishtam Yoshev Alim, does almost nothing. Even when he steals the brachot from Esav, if you read through it, all the verbs are very passive. Who's running that show? Rivka, right? Rivka's doing everything. Yaakov is almost being puppeted around and is very reluctant to participate in this plan. So he really is the Ishtam Yoshev Alim. He really is the carbon copy of his father. But then Rivka wins, right? Her vision carries the day against, right? She fools Yitzchak. And now Yaakov is the recipient, the beneficiary of both of these brachot, both the religious bracha that was always going to be his, the Birkot Avram, and this bracha of material wealth and political power that he got that was originally intended by Yitzchak for Esav. Okay, we'll get back to that bracha in a little bit. So now we get to the beginning of next week's parsha, the beginning of Vayetze. Okay, so we're in source 6. So Yaakov at this point, he flees his father's house, and we know of Yaakov as this Emet Tiferet personality, right, which we call the synthesis of the two, of Chesed and Gvura. But that's when we look back on his life historically. That's what he was. But to this point, he seems like a clone of his father. He seems to be entirely the kolonik, the sealed off Gibor personality. So he goes and he flees and he takes a rest. Vayachalom, and he dreams. V'hinei sulam mutzav arza v'rosho magia hashamayim. Right, and he sees this ladder its feet are on the ground, but it reaches all the way to the heavens. Now let's look at what happens over here. V'hinei malachei alokim olim v'yordimbo. There are these angels of God going up and down. V'hinei Hashem nitzav alav. Hashem is standing on top of the ladder. Vayomer, and Hashem says, Ani Hashem, I am God. Elokei Avram Avicha v'Elokei Yitzchak. The God of Avram, your father, and the God of Yitzchak. Okay, and then he goes and he gives him Zera and Aretz, right? Children and, he promises him children and land. This is the Birkat Avram that Yitzchak gave him at the end of Toldot. Hashem is now giving him at the beginning of Vayetze. Okay, good. So he gets that bracha. We're in Pasuk Tetzai now. Vayikatz Yaakov Mishnato. Yaakov wakes up from his sleep. Vayomer, and he says, Achen yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh. God is in this place. V'anochi lo yodati. I didn't know. Vayira, and he became awed or frightened. Vayomar, and he says, Manu rah hamakom hazeh. How awesome is this place? Ein zakim beit Elokim. This is nothing but God's house. V'zeh sha'ar shamayim, and this is the gateway to heaven. At that point, he wakes up again. He takes the stone that had been around his head, makes it into a mizbeach, and calls out b'shem Hashem. Calls out b'shem Hashem, and then he makes a neder that if you take care of me on my journey, then you'll be for me a god. And v'chol asher titein li aser asfenu lach. I will give ma'aser to you. Okay? A few questions. They're highlighted over here. Question number 1. The Shem Hashem, God's name, goes back and forth. It says, first, follow the underlines. Elokim, Hashem, 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 Elokim. God's going back and forth. The pasuk is going back and forth in describing Hashem between two different names, the Shem Elokim and the Shem Hashem. Okay? Traditionally, the Shem Hashem represents Chesed, and the Shem Elokim, represents Din or Gvura, etc. Fine. Question number 1. Question number 2, if you look, he says, when he's identifying himself to Yaakov, he says, Ani Hashem Elokei Avram Avicha ve'Elokei Yitzchak. What word is missing there? Avicha, right? So Rashi explained, right? I am the son of Avram, your father, and the son of Yitzchak. Where's your father, right? Rashi explains this. Why is it called Avram his father? Because grandchildren are like children. Okay, but children are certainly like children, right? And then at the end, he wakes up and he says these 4 phrases that seem almost indistinguishable from one from the other. Right? He wakes up and he says, Yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh. God is in this place. I didn't know. Manu rah hamakom hazeh. How awesome is this place? Ein zakim beit Elokim. This is nothing but the house of God. V'zeh sha'ar shamayim. And this is the gateway to heavens. What's he saying over here, over and over? Okay, so perhaps Yaakov comes, and as we said, he is this entirely Gvura personality at this point. And Hashem comes to him, and if you like it, great. If not, we'll move on. Right? Vayachalom, and he dreamt. V'hinei, and Yitzchak was. Sulam mutavarza, he was this ladder that his feet were on the ground, but Rosh Hashemayim, right? His head was off in the clouds. He was exactly, they say, it never says that Yitzchak came back from the Akedah, right? It says that Avraham returns from the Akedah. In modern scholarship, people make the argument that Avraham actually killed Yitzchak. It seems like an awfully questionable reading, considering that it says in the pasuk that he didn't. But the evidence is that he doesn't come down. So the Baal Musar say that what does it mean he never came down? After that he was off in the heavens. Right? In other words, we've met people like that they live and function in this world, but they're not really of this world. So perhaps Yaakov was like that. V'hinei, from Yaakov's perspective, Malachei Elokim olim v'yordimbo. He sees angels going up and down. So if you're Yaakov at this point, and you see angels, who are they? They are God's angel. Who is God to you? Elokim, right? The God of Gvura, the God of strength. But v'hinei, in reality, Hashem nitzaveh, right? Hashem, the God of Chesed, is standing above you. Vayomer, and he says to him, Ani Hashem, I am Hashem, the Chesed personality, God, right? It's the same God, right? He just has different manifestations. Elokei Avram Avicha ve'Elokei Yitzchak. I'm not just he knew that Hashem was Yitzchak's God. He knew Hashem as the God of Yitzchak, as this strong, one-on-one personality. What he's telling Yaakov is that's not enough. Ani Elokei Avram Avicha. Avram is also your father. Avram is also your religious role model. Now it's not sufficient for you to just go and follow your father. Right? Either this was the plan all along, or based on Rivka's, manipulating things, you now have this dual role that you're going to have to live up to. And then he gives him the bracha, and Vayikat Yaakov Mishnato, he wakes up, Vayomer Achin Yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh. Right? Hamakom, often in the Torah, has a secondary meaning. It refers to God, right? Hamakom yirachem etchem, Hamakom yirachem aleim, right? It means Hashem. Yesh Hashem, there is this side of Chesed, this Hashem name, b'makom hazeh, within God. V'anochi lo yadati, I had no idea, right? That's not the way that I've been living my life. But then Vayira, he became frightened, he became scared. Vayomar manorah hamakom hazeh. There also is this element of fear within God. He didn't just say, Ani Elokei Avraham Avicha. Right? He didn't say go all the way to the other extreme. He said, Ve'elokei Yitzchak. So Yaakov now needs to balance. Right? Manorah makom hazeh. Hashem also has this side within him. Ein Zekiyim Beit Elokim. We shift back to the Din, the Dvura name of Hashem. Right? This is God's place. V'zeh, this synthesis of the Hashem and the Elokim, of the Chesed and the Dvura, Zeh Shar HaShamayim. This is my pathway, this is my gateway to heaven. And then he wakes up, and what does he do? So, all of a sudden, he starts doing what his grandfather did. He builds a matzeva, he builds a mizbeach, and he says, if you will be, right? If you look in Pasuk Vav, if you support me and give me food to eat and clothing, and you support me on this journey that I have, v'shavti b'shalom al beit avi, and I can complete my mission, come back to my father's house, v'haya Hashem li le'elokim, and if Hashem is an Elokim, right, if it's true that I can incorporate, you help me incorporate both of these sides of Hashem into my own personality, v'chol asher titein li aser asenu. Right? I will then go and give Maaser. Maaser, this symbol of Avraham, of Chesed, I'm going to now adopt onto myself. And then, from this moment on, by the time he gets to Lavan, he's already much more of an active operator, taking control of things instead of just reacting to things. Okay? Good. Questions? Or go for it? Fine. Good. So let's go forward. So then we get to Yaakov and his wives and his kids.
Question?
Yeah, please.
How can you give Hashem the ultimatum, if you watch over me, then I'll do this, if you take care of me?
Right. So that's a great and important question. I think Rav Meidan has an essay on it, because there's a dispute about where, within the Tanai, the if-then, where does the if end and the then start? Right? In other words, V'haya Hashem li le'elokim, let's say. Is that part of the then? Right? If you take care of me, then you'll be my God? Or is it just at the end, if all this happens, then I'll give back to you? Right? So that's a good question. I can try and find the article for you. But yeah, Yaakov does seem a little bit aggressive over here in his interaction with Hashem. The question of when he does all this, right? We find him later when he returns that he does make the matzeva. We don't necessarily find him giving maaser. Some people say that Levi becoming the shevet that was offered to Hashem, that was the maaser to a certain extent. That he gave one out of his. If you who weren't you counting? I think at that point you would not count Yosef, or if you're rounding up. I'm not sure exactly how it works. They say that is a piece of the maaser. Fine. Okay, so we see this a little bit in this split carries on with Yaakov, as we pointed out, whereas Abraham had his Ezer Kenegdo. Abraham was the Chesed personality. He had Sarah, who was the Gvura specialist. And in the flip side, Yitzchak had Rivka, who was the Chesed personality. Yaakov, who now comes with this dual role, this dual mission, so he has two wives, right? He has Leah, who represents who is the Gvura against the Chesed part of himself, and Rachel, who also has the well scene and gives him water, as the Chesed personality against his Gvura. And we're going to see it a little later in their kids, just briefly on the wives themselves. So one episode that we find is that they're leaving. Rachel steals the trafim, the idols, from her father, right? And there's also a significant amount of Rachel bashing, and a lot of Philo, I know, was not a big fan. He said that Leah and Rachel represented good and not as good, that Leah would bring out Yaakov's good side, and Rachel was pulling him away from that. Chazal very much are not into that at all. But the assumption within Chazal is that the reason why she stole the trafim, that she stole the idols, is to pull them away from her father, right? He's now losing all the positive influences in his life, so I don't want to leave him these materials. This way I can kind of wean him off of the Avodah Zarah, right? So how come Leah didn't take them? It sounds like a good argument, but like we were saying, for the Chesed personality, for Rachel, I need to be concerned about somebody else's spiritual life, somebody who's very close to me. So my job is not just to take care of myself, but to take care of those around me. To Leah, that seems horrifically dangerous, right? I'm going to take Avodah Zarah, I'm going to take idols, and bring them into my house, to my possession. That's awful, right? That's far too great a risk. The argument of the Gibor is that when I go and try to influence others, they're as likely to influence me, which is far too high a risk to take, right? Okay. Again, think of Satmar versus Lubavitch, right? Okay, so, and then we see this later in their children as well, as we'll get to in a moment. Let's just have a couple of stops along the way. If you look here in source 7, the Maaseh Dudaim, I always like to sit on this for a minute, because for a while I just thought this was the most bizarre story that was very, very challenging to understand. So what happens over here is Leah starts having child after child after child, right? And she has 4 children, and then she stops. Rachel has nothing. And Leah names her children after the lack of love that she feels from her husband, right? Reuven, right? God saw that my husband doesn't love me, and therefore he gave me this son. Shimon, God heard that my husband doesn't, right? My pain, and right? Levi, hapam yelav ishi, right? That now, the optimist, now my husband will accompany me, right? The joke that everybody always says is, why did she say that with Levi, hapam yelav ishi, now my husband will accompany me? Because she has 2 hands and 3 kids, right? So at that point, hapam yelav ishi. And then finally with Yehuda, she says, hapam odet Hashem, now I will thank Hashem. Fine. And Rachel is very upset. She goes to Yaakov and he's like, bring me children, right? Your father davened for your mother when she didn't have kids. Why aren't you davening for me? And Yaakov responds harshly. All of a sudden, you have the story with the Dudaim, right? That Reuven goes and finds the Dudaim, these flowers, these jaspers, I think they're called, and he brings them to Leah. And Rachel goes and says to Leah, give me these flowers. And Leah says, it's bad enough that you took my husband, right? Now you also want to take my flowers. What's going on, right? You want to take my son's flowers. So Rachel says, you know what? Fair enough. So in exchange for the flowers that you give me, so Yaakov will stay with you tonight, right? Each of the wives had their own tent. Yaakov was based in Rachel's tent. So he says, tonight you get Yaakov, and that's what happened. Yaakov comes in from the fields, and Leah goes and meets him. But Tatse Leah, she goes out to meet him, and she says, I kind of acquired you tonight, tachat duda ebenim, right? In exchange for my son's flowers. And that night, Yisachar is conceived. Yisachar is actually spelled Yisachar, right, with 2 sins. But Chazal explained it. The pasuk says that it's as a schar, as a reward for myself. So the point is that it's a reward for 2 things, right? It's a reward for her giving up the Dudaim for Yaakov, and it's a reward for, I think, for giving her maidservant over to Yaakov. That one I don't remember that well. Whatever it is, it's a reward for 2 things. One of them is unseemly. This whole Dudaim thing of trading in Yaakov is not something we want to talk about, and therefore we write it with the two sins, but we only say it, we speak it with one. We call it Yisachar instead of Yisachar. Fine. So I think the key to understanding the story is realizing that Reuven is not a key part of it. I kept trying to think of everything that we know about Reuven, that we're going to talk about soon. How does this make sense? I think Reuven is not a part of the story. He's just the facilitator. And what this basically is a story between two sisters, each of whom is so consumed with jealousy over what she doesn't have that she can't appreciate what she does have. Okay? Many, many commentators explain that these dudaim were a fertility drug. So that becomes a big key to start putting things together, right? So Reuven comes, finds this fertility drug, and brings it to his mother. Rachel sees this and says, "Are you kidding me? You have 4 kids already, right? It's bad enough you stole my house. Give it to me. I'm the one who needs it. Why would you keep taking it?" Leah says, "Wait a minute. You already stole my husband. The only thing I have going for me is that I'm the one with the kids. So now you want to go and you want to steal that from me also?" So she said, "Okay, you know what? So you take Yaakov tonight." Right? Now, so it makes a little bit more sense, but each one couldn't appreciate what they really did have, right? Leah had the children. Rachel had her husband. That's what Yaakov says back to her. Oh, I cut the pasuk off a little bit too early. But when she complains, and when she complains to Yaakov and says, "Bring me children," ve'imlad, and if not, mitam, right? If you don't give me children, it's as if I'm dead. So Yaakov's reaction is, "What do you mean? It's as if you're dead. What about me?" Right? You've got. So each one was so looking at what the other had, and what they didn't have, they couldn't appreciate what they did have. And if you look, it says each one was punished for their actions in this. Leah was punished that the episode of Dinah happened because because of her actions. It says Vatitze Dinah is parallel to the language of Vatitze Leah, right? And it says that Rachel was punished that if you don't care about being with Yaakov, so then for eternity you're not going to be with Yaakov, right? And Yaakov is in fact buried with Leah at the Marat HaMachpelah, whereas Rachel is buried on the side of the road. But if we think about these punishments, they're very fitting, right? Hashem basically says to Leah, well, if you're not going to appreciate your kids and look after your kids, then I'm not going to look out for your kids either. I mean, again, saying the Dinah episode, which I hope we'll have time to talk about. If not, maybe we'll get to it next week, I'm not sure. Dinah episode is complicated. The fact that it says that it's a punishment for Yaakov and a punishment for Leah doesn't necessarily mean that that's complicated, right? Generally, we don't punish children for the acts of their parents. But Hashem is very good at doling things out in appropriate ways. So the pain that was caused to Leah and to Yaakov, setting aside the pain that was caused to Dinah, can be explained as in response, as punishment for some of their actions. They tell a story about Rav Aryeh Levine, that someone was trying to get him to buy life insurance. And he says, "How can I buy life?" No. They said, "Come on, you have to buy life insurance." So he says, "Look, let's say in all my MS, Hashem is trying to decide." And they go, Aryeh, I think it's his time. He's not so good. He's not such a good guy. Let's chop him. And they mount all types of defenses. And Hashem says, "No, can't do it." And then the defense attorney goes and says, "But wait, he has a wife. He has children. They need him. They depend on him." And Hashem starts thinking, that's a good point. And then the prosecutor said, he has life insurance. That's not halacha ma'aseh. Right? The point is that Hashem is we don't understand how these things work, right? But Hashem, his point can be pointed in this way, in a way that human courts cannot be, to fine-tune. So whatever it means that Leah was punished for Dinah, which is a bigger question, right? It seems almost like, well, if you're not going to appreciate your children, then I also am not going to look out for them in the same way. And the Rachel punishment seems particularly pointed if you don't don't appreciate your marriage to Yaakov, so then in eternity I won't either. But what's beautiful about it is that the flip side is that in death each one gets what they didn't get in life, right? What Leah wanted was to be Yaakov's wife, which for eternity she is in the Marat Machpelah. What Rachel wanted was to be the mother, and she, based on her being buried separate from the other Avot, when the Jews are in Golus and they're walking by Beit Lechem, and that's when they really need her. There's that beautiful medrash that Avraham goes and pleads to Hashem, and Yitzchak and Yaakov and Moshe, and everybody goes, and finally Rachel goes and starts crying, Rachel mevakal baneha. Mama Rachel, she becomes the paradigmatic mother, right? The woman who couldn't have children for so long becomes the mother of all of Klal Yisrael. So on the one hand, the Medrash highlights the negative, that they're being punished for what they didn't appreciate, but in the end, they each end up getting what they desperately wanted. Yeah. That was nicer by the end, no? You're so upset about the...
It was.
About the bad
My name's
part,
Rachelea, so I always had it.
Okay. It's always well upfront about our baggage, okay, good.
Not
Yeah.
an inner conflict. What's Reuben's, why would he want to help his mother with her fertility? She had 4 kids. Were they so out there and everybody knew this struggle they were having?
So I'm not
Is
sure.
it inappropriate for, I don't know how old Reuben was, but
I'm not sure.
was he just picking flowers for his mama? Or
We're
was
gonna
he-
talk about Ruvain next week, please God. But we see that Ruvain elsewhere
He's
poked his
protected.
nose into his parents' personal lives, right? He's the one, whether you read it
Yeah.
as in Pshat or in Drash, that he moved his father's bed, or that actually Vayishkav Reuven is at Bilhah, right? He was the firstborn. The firstborn sometimes struggle with that boundary between being the third parent and the first kid. So maybe that is an element of it. I always viewed it a little bit more innocently,
Just picking
but maybe.
flowers?
I don't know. But it seems like you're, as Rachelea, you have a similar task as Yaakov did, right? To kind of put both of them together, the best of all of them. So just as a quick punchline to all this, and then next week we'll get to what I think of as the leadership of the next generation. Who's going to take over for Yaakov? I always like to view it kind of like an election, where you have the Bnei Rachel primary, and we'll discuss Yosef versus Binyamin, and then you have the Bnei Leah primary, where that was more like the Republican field, where you had many more candidates, right? And we'll try to whittle down to a single candidate from each party, and then see how exactly we ended up with the leader that we had, which, if you're reading Sefer Bereshis, is a surprise, right? I think any fresh set of eyes reading Sefer Bereshis would assume that the leader going forward, that the Malchut would end up with Yosef, and ultimately we end up with Yasser Shevet mi Yehuda, that Yehuda ends up being the leader, which is a surprise ending. So we're going to try and figure out A, why, and B, where do the characters find out that this is actually the case. If we have time for a quick postscript, no, I don't think we do actually. Okay, Yasher, either we'll get to it next week or we won't, but it's not as quick as I thought. Okay, it's only online, but okay. Yasher Koch, thanks so much. I'm looking forward to one more week. I'm going to miss this.
Yes, I know, some other people.
No, not at all. It's, I think it very much added.
Marcia, he's like, careful what you wish for. With the two, like, what they wrote is vision for, and then they
Right.
they wish for,
Exactly.
but not exactly the way they.
Exactly. Like a little Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking when you said.
Yeah.